Still getting better at that. Still getting better. Not going to say I'm really good at it yet, because quite frankly, I don't understand, even though I've been a fan of metal for a long time, I don't know how in the world those guys do that for an extended period. Because my voice, even after doing that little bit of nothing right there, is already telling me that you have screwed up. You're going to have a problem recording the remainder of this program. How you doing, folks? Welcome to another edition of the Weekly Trim with yours beardly, the one and only Redbeard, or at least the only guy who calls himself Redbeard for the next 10 square miles or so, possibly less. We've got some pretty ginger beards going on out there in this part of the world. At any rate, as we have said, this is another edition of the Weekly Trim here on the Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel. Appreciate your patronage. Appreciate you joining us here with the program. And also checking out what we got here on the channel. We're all the time adding new stuff, whether it be a updated edition of the old podcast here, possibly a new episode of the Rasslin with Redbeard vlog. You know, we haven't done one of those in forever. I keep saying I'm going to, but you never know. It might turn around to where we actually do another one of those. We know all kind of stuff, match videos, highlights, all kind of cool stuff. This is a mixed bag if ever there was one in terms of a YouTube channel, and that was not my intention whenever we started doing this thing, but guess what? It's kind of where we are. So it's, I'll say, a smorgasbord or a potpourri, if you want to make a Jeopardy analogy there or comparison. And it just, you know, it is what it is. We do a lot of cool stuff on this channel. We like to have fun. We like to talk about all kinds of things here on the podcast. And just, you know, it's kind of a reflection of my life. It's a mixed bag from one side or the other. So here we are. Thank you for joining us. And as I have said before, if you are not already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. That way you can join up with us and know whenever we've added something new, whether it be, like we said, a match video, a vlog, a podcast, whatever the case may be. And this is the July 18th edition of 2019, I should say, of the podcast here on the Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel. And I want to kick things off here by talking about the fact that we are in the middle of a whole bunch of wrestling. There's a whole bunch of pro wrestling going on. And it's, you know, it's been one of those things where if you're a fan, if you're someone who follows not only our scene here locally in the Carolinas, but also the broader spectrum of things, you've got a lot to be happy about right now. A lot of cool things going on, a lot of stuff that you can really get behind and enjoy and really just, you know, be appreciative of, because there's been a lot of stuff that's been iffy at best here for a long time in terms of various products and things that have been on the marketplace. But right now, I have to say that it's probably as good as it's been, you know, in terms of the whole gamut of things. You know, we're talking not just about the local stuff, we're also talking about WWE, we're talking about bigger companies like Impact, and of course like AEW, but you know, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves in some things I want to talk about in the second segment of the program, because I want to focus more on the local stuff here and some things we've had a chance to experience here recently. I hadn't had a chance to go to a PWX or a Premiere Wrestling Xperience event in quite some time. I had a chance last weekend to go up to Charlotte, North Carolina, to the Grady Cole Center there and check out an event they were calling Legend. The reason for the name Legend was because of the fact that they were able to secure a date with none other than Jushin Thunder Liger. If you don't know who Jushin Thunder Liger is, then you evidently haven't spent much time watching the history of professional wrestling, because when it comes to the idea of a junior, which of course is kind of the branch off of a cruiserweight style competitor, Jushin was at the forefront of developing a lot of the styles that you see today in pretty much any promotion in the world when it comes to that high impact, high flying style of wrestling that is commonly known with cruiserweights, but not exclusively to them. Jushin has had a career that spans multiple decades, has wrestled for every company literally in the entire world, whether it be Ring of Honor, WWE, PWG, anything in between, WCW, of course. Lots of just crazy things in his career that he's had a chance to do. And this was going to be his final appearance in North Carolina. Might as well go ahead and say the Carolinas as a whole, because the man's not getting a license to compete in South Carolina at this point in time. I wouldn't do it if I was him. I wouldn't, go through that whole rigmarole, but that's a different story for a different day there. But at any rate, this was, as we said, billed as his final appearance in North Carolina, and the whole show was really geared towards building up to the match he was going to be involved with, which was a six-man tag, where he would be joining forces with the Southern Savior John Schuyler and Mr. PWX himself, Ethan Case, to take on the newly reformed, might have been a one-time, probably I'd say a one-off type thing there as well, but the newly reformed Revolt. That being the combination of the Man Scout Jake Manning, Caleb Conley, and Zane Riley. By the end of the match, it did not appear that Jake Manning was on the same page with those two other guys. Jake, I would say, is definitely going his own way now. Jake has been a favorite of mine for a long time. Really, he was one of the first guys whenever I got back into watching indie pro wrestling. He was one of the first guys I saw. And even way back then, this is 10, 15 plus years ago now, even way back then, he struck me as one of those guys that was just really super talented and could have gone a long way if he had been noticed by somebody. But, it didn't work out for one reason or another, and Jake's got plenty of other things going for him, so more power to you, brother. I love you, and I think the world of you in terms of your talents and whatnot. And you definitely have been showing things off still to this day, because I don't want to talk about him as though he's retiring by any stretch of the imagination, but he's definitely more exclusive in some of the things that he does. And in getting involved with this, he showed the fact that he was still willing to come back around and rejoin with the Revolt when necessary. But it, as we said, by the end of that match, it did not appear that he was on the same page as those guys, because he was appreciative of the opportunity there. Schuyler and Case and, of course, Liger did get the win in the ultimate ending of the match there. Very entertaining contest. The card as a whole was very entertaining. The thing of this whole deal with them calling it Legend and promoting it also as the biggest PWX event ever, or I'm going to butcher the actual verbiage that they use, but they refer to it as, that kind of thing, to where this was the biggest show they've ever put on. In terms of attracting a name talent, I would say sure, that is 100% accurate. Was this the best PWX show I've ever been to, or would I consider this to have lived up to that type of billing? No. I can think of numerous Rise of a Champion cards that they've put on that have been better than this. And that's not to denigrate, anybody who's on this particular card. It's just that, there have been cards they've produced in the past that were better than this one. This, however, was a celebration not only of Liger, but also of a couple of New Japan Pro Wrestling talents. You had Rocky Romero on the card there, and also Roppongi 3K. Like I mentioned, the whole card, very entertaining. There were, of course, a couple of standout matches, and there were a couple that were kind of not really duds, but they were not really, they didn't get anything really going in some cases. The match of the night to me, other than the main event, in terms of just being a real signature moment of the whole show, was Harlem Bravado versus Rocky Romero. Why in the world somebody has not picked up Harlem Bravado to sign him to an exclusive deal, I have no idea. Harlem has every bit of what you look for in a talent, in my opinion. He has height, he's got the frame, he's got the size, he can promo, he can do anything you ask him to in the ring. He's one of those very rare talents where it's like, I've heard Jim Cornette say something along the lines of, and it's as though Barry Windham walked in the room. And that's kind of the same thing with Harlem Bravado. He forever was a tag team specialist there with his brother, and, he got out on his own and has been doing singles for a long time. Been working over in Europe, doing great things there. been working here in the States as well and doing great things here. So I'm hoping at some point in time he will get an opportunity to, be able to work for one of the big boys, because he deserves it. I really think he does. There's a couple of guys on this card who also deserve that opportunity. So hopefully they'll all get some kind of attention by virtue of this and other things that they're doing within the scene. Mentioned that there were one or two matches on the card there that weren't all that great. Let me rephrase. It's not that they were not that great. It's just that there were a couple of maybe missteps or whatnot in the match that just didn't allow it to get to the point that it really should have. And one of those was Billy Brash versus Saeed Al-Sabah. I really had high hopes for this one coming in, and they never really gelled. It didn't seem like. And part of that, we talk about Saeed in multiple editions of the program here. Saeed is such a unique individual in the presentation, but also in the style he works, to where I feel like there are some occasions that people don't always know what to do with it. And I'm not just talking about in terms of fans and being able to understand what he's doing. I'm also talking about the people he's in the ring with, because there are occasions where it's like, okay, well, what in the world is that? Where am I supposed to be? Wrestling in terms of the in-ring stuff is a lot about footwork and pacing and what have you. And if you're out of balance, if you're out of range of something, you can not only hurt yourself, you can hurt your opponent in there as well. But, that match never really got going, in my opinion. But, for the most part, as we said, very highly entertaining show, very much worth the time to go up there and check that out. Did it live up to the hype of saying, this is our biggest show ever? Maybe not. Maybe it did, depending on who you are. If you're a huge Liger fan and you read this show, probably it might be. But to me, I can think of numerous, like I said before, Rise of a Champion cards. Like Rise of a Champion in 2018 was just balls to the wall crazy, in my opinion. Great show. But there have been multiple others that were just phenomenal that they've put together. And, this was another one for the ages in terms of the combination of talent that was there. But, just my personal opinion, not the biggest show ever. Great show. Very, very entertaining show. And very much worth the price of admission that we paid. We had bleacher seats, and they were around $15 a person. So to see Liger, to see that card, and to have a relatively comfortable bleacher seat there where you're not jammed up against somebody else in, one of the seats that was on the floor there, that was great. I can't ask for much more as a fan of professional wrestling. And the Grady Cole Center as a venue, fantastic place. I'm glad that they decided not to tear the place down, because it's still got plenty of legs. It's a great little venue. Could be host to a number of different things, not only concerts, but events like this and other stuff as well. So hopefully the area there will continue to support the Grady Cole Center, because it's got a lot of opportunity there. It's not a huge venue, but there are lots of things that can be done with that building. So hopefully they'll continue to support it and to make it a option for promoters and for event whatever the term would be there, event promoters, event sanctioners, whatever you want to call it, to use that building, because it's definitely got some use left in it. And one of the other things that we talked about previously with the whole show there was the controversy over the pricing of some of the seats and the pricing of the show overall. And then you look also at the final attendance that was reported for this event, and we're just talking about the whole spectrum of things here, because that's what we do on this program. We're not trying to poke the bear, so to speak, but we just want to talk about the whole gamut of things here. Now, the Grady Cole Center, as it was configured, I had an idea in mind that it was somewhere in the area of between 12 and 1,400 available seats, as they had it laid out. I may be totally wrong, but I went by the seating chart that was available online and just kind of got a sort of a gauge for what they were offering at that point in time, or by using that graphic anyway. So it was maybe between 12 and 1,400 total seats available. The attendance figure that we were told was in the area of 650. So you're talking about around half of the house, which, that sounds bad in terms of the actual, attendance there, where you say, well, my God, you only sold half of what you had available. But then you look at the fact that they were charging, in essence, $15 and up for the seats that were there, and in some cases around $70+ for a seat. They probably were just fine in terms of making money off of this event. I would go so far as to say they probably did make money off of this event. There were some controversy leading up to this thing, saying that it was a ridiculous price point, and I kind of bought into that, and saying that for those floor seats, there's no way in hell that a normal, like myself, a father or whatnot, we could not take, my son and a couple of his friends or whatever to a show like this and afford it, because at least sitting in those seats anyway. Now, sitting in the bleachers, that would be a different thing, but sitting on the floor, that wouldn't be possible. But the controversy over the ticket prices, I think, was kind of moot in the grand scheme of things, because there are plenty of seats available and plenty of opportunities for people who couldn't afford or didn't want to spend $40 plus on a ticket to come see this show and have a great seat as well. Because the seats we had, I'll tell you, for my money, I think we had a better seat than some of the people who were on the floor, because I like to sit up a little high, and I also like to be able to see, the whole arena from wherever I'm sitting. That's just kind of one of my things. I either like to be on the front row, or I like to be with somewhere where I can sit back and kind of get the gauge and the layout of the entire thing. And that's what we had with the seats that we had for this show. So again, it was a very worthwhile trip for me. There was value in the ticket for sure. So it was a great thing, great opportunity to see a legend in the flesh there in Jushin Thunder Liger, and to see a lot of great talent in competition there at a historic venue. So all things totaled, nothing bad to say, except for the fact that it ended. Yes, the show has to end. That's the only bad thing, or the only sad thing about these things, these shows, these little experiences, as you want to call them. They do all eventually have to end. And unfortunately, this segment has also ended. We'll be back in a few moments.
1, 2, 3, 4. I'll never dream that I'd be somebody like you. I'll never dream that I'd be somebody like you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for continuing to hang out with us here on the Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel. This is the weekly trim for the week of July 18th, 2019. You know, we call this thing the weekly trim because I thought that would be a keen idea to, just playing off the whole beard thing, because everything seems to be a beard-related title when it comes to any of the programming we have on this channel here of ours. But realistically, I don't trim my beard once a week. I might trim my beard once a month these days. My beard has gotten pretty crazy. I do a little bit of an undershave to keep the old neck there tidy and whatnot, but I'm trying to, get some length to it. And one of the crazier things about when you grow a beard and when you get some length to your beard, as I go to stroke my beard just then, I touched my microphone in the process of doing that. You start to, need to put product and whatnot in this thing to keep it from being as unruly as it can be. And it just, you start to see various products for what they are and what they can and cannot do for you. But, I don't trim mine very often anymore. I might do a little bit of shaping here and there, but it's definitely not a weekly trim. So what's in a name, as we've said before, it's not truth in advertising by a stretch of the imagination, but it seemed to work whenever I originally started doing this show, so it is what it is. Welcome back. As we said a moment ago, we're still talking wrestling. This is a very wrestling-heavy channel, obviously, and this is a very wrestling-heavy edition of the weekly trim here on the Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel. We're talking now about the fact that we had a whole lot more wrestling this past weekend, even though the weekend before, of course, we had the PWX event that we discussed there in the first segment. This past weekend, we had a whole bunch of wrestling as well between AEW, that being All Elite Wrestling, and WWE and various things they were involved with promoting. We'll have to talk and getting into this whole thing about the fact that the AEW event, which was titled Fight for the Fallen, was registered and put together as a tribute event for individuals who were slain as part of a moment of gun violence, unfortunately, that happened in Jacksonville here a number of years ago. And the whole concept of the show was, as we mentioned there, to be a fundraiser, to gather money to help victims of these crimes and whatnot, and of these unfortunate scenarios. And you had this thing put together as a very, cool opportunity for fans and talent alike to contribute to a very worthy cause. And then you kind of have things happen as they will in the business, where suddenly there's a indie sort of event that shows up on the WWE network on the same night as the AEW event. And people suddenly are taking a dump in the bed, because it's one of those deals to where, did they counter the AEW event? And when I say they, I'm talking WWE. Did they counter the AEW event sort of recklessly without thinking, okay, well, this is what we're actually engaging in here, and saying, okay, we're going to try and program against a show that is a tribute, that is a fundraiser for a very worthy cause? Or did they just want to counter-program against them, period, in order to try and hit their ratings and to, hit them where it counts in the good old pocketbook there? to me, it's a challenge in looking at this thing because as a fan, you see the fact that both of these programs are going on at the same time, and it's like, holy cow, this is like it was in the 90s. I can flip back and forth between Raw and Nitro, except now it's WWE and AEW. I've got great wrestling on two different platforms. And you should have seen me, I could put a picture in here if I wanted to, but you should have seen me in my living room because I had Bleacher Report Live on my big screen playing the AEW event, and then I had the Evolve Wrestling program on my tablet. So within the same eye shot, I could have had, both of them playing there at the same time on the TV if I wanted to, but I had, one on the big screen and one on the tablet there so that they were both, within eye view to where if anything happened, I could focus on one or the other. And it was just a tremendous example of where we are technologically speaking from a fan's perspective. Because back, like we mentioned, in the 90s, you had to have a good recall button on your remote control to flip back and forth between those channels and hope that you hadn't missed anything. But in this case, you were able to watch both of them pretty much simultaneously. So the whole idea of, from some of the AEW people and saying, oh, well, they're trying to take advantage of something that we had already put together and yada, yada, yada. I get it, but from, again, the perspective of a modern fan, if I wanted to consume both of your programs, I've got an opportunity to do that. So nothing was really in the way of one or the other benefiting from a viewership of really what are thirsty wrestling fans right now in terms of people wanting this content. So from that perspective, I don't think there was really that much going on there. Was it an attempt by WWE to take advantage of the scenario to say, okay, we've got a show going on as well? I don't think so. I think that this was for sure. Well, let me rephrase. I don't necessarily think this was aimed at taking a shot at AEW. I think this was more just timing in general in terms of the show being what it was, and there also being an opportunity to showcase Evolve, which is a brand that, I don't know, I shouldn't call it a brand, because it's not really a brand of WWE. It's a subsidiary, sort of a feeder, if you will, to NXT. It's a company that we know for sure does get some funding from WWE, probably gets a lot of funding from WWE at this point in time. But the concept of this thing being some type of a counter to what AEW was doing, I think it's debatable, because again, in this day and age, people have the opportunity to see both. But getting beyond that, these programs were both very cool in what they put out there. I will say I was more focused on the Evolve event because of the fact that there were people on that show that we know and that we appreciate by virtue of the fact that they are local talents from the Carolinas, people that we can see on, any given Sunday, Saturday, Friday afternoon. Of course, one of them being Harlem Bravado. He was on the event there. The other two, of course, were the blue-collar badass J.D. Drake and Anthony Henry. Anthony Henry was in I shouldn't call it a lower profile contest because it definitely was a very brutal match. If you watch the thing, those two guys beat the living tar out of each other. But in terms of the matches that received a real big amount of focus, you have to go to the match that J.D. Drake was in there because it was a title unification match where he, as the WWN champion, was being challenged by the Evolve champion, Austin Theory. And, the whole thing there would have been fine for what it was, but then suddenly out walks Paul Heyman to introduce everybody. And it's like, holy shit, where in the world did this come from? And it was a great moment, insane thing to see, guys that have been around here in that moment and just being able to go out there and absolutely kill it in terms of their performance. Those matches, the ones that featured people, I'm talking about on the Evolve card now, were the ones that were really the focus of our attention. Overall, the rest of the card, were we all that into it? Not really. Because I'll be perfectly honest, I don't follow Evolve that closely. I did a little bit here and there in the years past as we had other people who were involved in that promotion, but I don't really follow Evolve. I will be the first to say that, I hear of it here and there. but I do not chase it down by any stretch of the imagination. So I was in tune. I was very much looking forward to the matches that our guys were involved in. I thought those were some great performances. But other than that, that show as a whole didn't do a whole lot for me. Um, Still, the matches that we were in tune for were very good, especially in my opinion, the title unification match there. Austin Theory, to me, has been already in one match of the year contender this year, and that was his match earlier this year with John Schuyler at Old School Championship Wrestling. I wouldn't say that this was the same match in terms of the outlook of it being perceived as a match of the year contender. However, it was a very good match. And just a great dynamic in terms of these two guys and what they are presentation wise, to where you have kind of the Dusty Rhodes-esque JD Drake, to where he's the everyman versus the definite body guy, up and comer Austin Theory, who I couldn't believe he's only 21 years old. I really thought he was older than that, but to hear him say he's 21 and to look the way he does and to perform the way he does, wow, that's going to really be one to watch here in the coming years. But as we said, with the exception of those matches, not a whole lot of interest in Evolve. AEW, on the other hand, was really, it's still something that is so enticing as a whole in terms of what they do with AEW. And the cool thing there, not only in terms of it being a fresh company that is starting off still very new in establishing talent, storylines, the whole nine yards there. It's just very cool to see the combination of things with the visuals that they've created and the style they're developing. It looks like a wrestling show. There's not a whole lot of things you can do these days to recreate a wrestling show, because it's going to be wrestling no matter what you do. But in terms of the layout of their rink canvases with the nice big logo in the middle of it, and the colors and the way they shoot their show, it just looks very good. It doesn't look necessarily different from WWE, but it's definitely a quality production, and they're continuing to, I'd say, use this as dress rehearsals for whenever they start TV production. So the more their camera crews can get in there and work with things, and the more they can get their feet wet in terms of doing this on a regular basis, the better off they'll be. The card for AEW, man alive, they've really got a focus on tag team wrestling in terms of what they have done with this show, especially the tag team match between Dustin and Cody versus the Young Bucks. That was an amazing match there in terms of what those four guys did. The whole thing with it being four guys who kind of are friends and who put that to the side for this historic match, if you want to call it that. That was a cool thing there. But you kind of had the idea that this is something that we're going to do once and we're never going to mention it again type thing, because they're buddies and everybody knows they're buddies. By contrast, you had other matches in there, like with the Lucha Brothers, for example, and the 6-man tag where it was the combination of Joey Janela and Jimmy Havoc and Darby Allin. I think those guys, they're going to be tremendous additions to this roster whenever it starts rolling here. Also, the Lucha Brothers, I mean, they're just an insane thing. I'm very glad to have been able to have seen them several years ago before they were in the mainstream and before they were really receiving the amount of notoriety that they have now. So it was cool to see them back in that era. Not that they've changed a whole lot, because they are who they are, but nowadays, back then they didn't really work as a team. They were still just Ray Phoenix and Penta Zero M, whatever you want to call him. Nowadays, it's them as a tandem almost every time you see them working, and that's a very cool thing. The tag matches, again, were very cool. They were very much the focal point of what they've got going there. Luchasaurus, it's such a unique thing there. I know it's people say it's corny as hell with him coming out with a dinosaur mask and all this and the other, but he makes it work somehow. That's the crazy thing. And with him and Jungle Boy, that's a natural, organic tandem right there. And with Marco's stunt, even, it's one of those things where it's like, why does this make sense? And yet it just does. It's a great thing to see happen, and to see the fans get behind it there, because, I don't think anybody expected Marco's stunt to be there. I certainly didn't. And so when he comes out and he's suddenly between the legs of Jungle Boy there, it's like, wow, this is, one more layer of this crazy thing that they're creating. So now, you have to look to the future. What's going to come next for both of these things? Are we going to see more evolve on the WWE Network? I think at some point we will. I don't know when, but I'd say at some point we probably will. It may come soon. It may come next year. But I think they will, at some point in time, be back on the WWE Network, because this was very much an introductory thing and sort of a confirmation to a lot of casual fans who may not pay attention to stuff like this, that, there is this sort of quasi underlayer of the WWE product that is a feeder system to NXT. So a lot of these guys that you're seeing on this show, maybe in a year or two, maybe they'll be on NXT. And then maybe a couple of years from that, they'll be on the main roster. So it's a good way of introducing guys. What comes next for our dudes in terms of what we've got with JD Drake and with Anthony Henry, Harlan Bravado? That's a good question. I have no idea. Will they be back on Evolve events now that they've all kind of, had their opportunity there? Unfortunately, JD Drake, he did not win. Anthony Henry, he did not win. Harlan Bravado, he got pinned. You just have to wait and see. This is a crazy world we live in when it comes to pro wrestling and whatnot, and they'll, I'm sure, be around in some way, shape, or form. May not be focal points of the card in the future, but they'll be, I'd say, around in some way, shape, or form there. With AEW, they've got their next big event coming up here in, I think, about maybe a month or two, with the next event in Chicago. It's the next actual pay-per-view that they're going to be producing. The big question is, can they lure CM Punk to their show in some way, shape, or form? Because with it being in Chicago, people are going to say, all the way up until the moment the show starts and all the way till the show finishes and the closing credits roll there, they're going to say, is CM Punk here somewhere? And to me, I'm not going to say that the event and their product hinges on that, because it certainly doesn't. But if they could in some way secure him, I would think that would do a lot in terms of really putting them over the top and saying, okay, well, we're here now. We've got guys that can be real moneymakers for our business beyond just what we already had. And Punk, he is a real mystery at this point in time, because I saw him here a couple of weeks ago as part of a promotional spot for NASCAR, and I thought to myself, what in the hell is that about? Why is he promoting NASCAR? I thought he was an MMA fighter, and before that he was a pro wrestler. I just don't know what's going on with the guy right now. In the spot, he looked like he was still at his fighting weight. He did not look as though he had put on any weight in terms of musculature, or that he was anywhere near what he had been in terms of the beefiness that he had at one point in time when he was with WWE. So would he look like himself? Would he be able to come back and actually wrestle again? Who knows? Will they bring him back? Are they even interested in bringing him back? Who knows again? I would hope that maybe they could have some type of tie-in with him, because I think he's another guy who never got to have that nice little send-off moment to his career. It would be nice to have, if nothing else, for him to have some type of a opportunity to say, okay, I'm actually done now. And, kind of ride off in the sunset, because there's been a lot to his career that didn't go the way he wanted it to. And I just, from a fan's perspective, I would like to have that, presented to him in some way, shape, or form. Will it happen with AEW? Will it happen at all in our lifetimes? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. That's the answer to so many of our questions. We'll have to wait and see. And so we shall. But for now, we shall take a break. Be back in a few minutes, folks. Stay tuned.
The mirror of your dreams. Make believe I'm
Thank you for continuing to hang out with us here on this episode of the Weekly Trim on the Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel. You hear my squeaky chair in the background there. Maybe that's coming through there. I can't tell if it is or not on the old recording software we've got. But this is as we've, I think, talked about in one of other episodes, this is a very comfortable but very old chair. So if you hear what sounds like a creaky old door in the background of any of these episodes, it's just my old trusty chair here, giving you the what for. As we continue with this episode, we talked a lot of wrestling. Now we're going to go to one of our other, I'll say, not focal topics on this program, because we're a mixed bag here. But you know me, and if you've listened to this program at all in the past, I like to talk about what's going on with the old theme parks. And here for a while, we've had a lot going on in the development of the Galaxy's Edge additions to Disneyland and also Disney's Hollywood Studios. The park, the land, it's not a park, it's just a land. It's the expansion of these two existing parks. The land is open in the California edition of this whole thing here. And it's been met with very warm, responses. I would say overall people have enjoyed what they have been able to do with this land as it exists at this point in time anyway. However, there has been controversy with this thing. Of course there's been controversy with it. It wouldn't be something new related to Disney and Star Wars especially if, there was not some sort of I wouldn't say backlash, but at least some type of jaded response to what has been done in producing this whole thing. The talk has been here recently that the Galaxy's Edge is being considered by some to be a failure. Now that's a big word, failure in relation to Disney. They've had numerous failures in the past. Disneyland Paris, for God knows how long, was just a big fat stinker because nobody really wanted that park. And to some degree, people are questioning whether or not Star Wars fans wanted what has become Galaxy's Edge, because at least in this instance of it, in this version of it, I should say, it kind of is what it is. There's some questions here about, why did they push this thing to where it's open, but it's not finished? They've got one ride, we were promised two. Why did we go through the whole opening ceremonies and put the big shebang out here where we trot out George Lucas and Billy D. Williams and all the stars we can get a hold of? Why did we trot them all out here when the whole thing is not done? Why did we celebrate what is really a half-done park or half-done land? It's questionable. At this point in time, why would they do that? I really don't know. I don't think there's that much that would have really prevented them from saying, okay, well, we want to take the extra couple of months and we want to finish this thing and actually have it to where it's completed all around and have both rides where they're operating at capacity and give people the entire experience we promised. Because it's not just a second ride. There's some other stuff that the people talked about in promoting this thing that I don't think have come to fruition, because I think we were kind of promised, the idea of there being droids wandering around and there being characters other than just, we've seen Chewbacca and Rey, the stormtroopers, and Kylo Ren. We know they're going to be a part of this whole thing because they've been a part of the meet and greet sessions with this, with these parks, not just, with the land itself. They've been part of the meet and greet environment for a while here. So we were kind of expecting that whole thing there. And the deal with the one ride, it's great in terms of the way it looks. But again, we were sort of promised the fact that there would be multiple scenarios to the Smuggler's Run ride. And so far, we've only seen one. There's only one course of action in this ride. And, once you've done it a couple of times, you have the idea of what's going to be where. And it's like, you're flying by wire. And I'm sure there have been some people who've gotten perfect scores on this thing because of the fact that there's only one story to follow in the ride. It's like back when you first had Star Tours, and this is the comparison that they've wound up getting, because when Star Tours originally opened, you only had one path to that ride. It was the same thing all the time. It wasn't until the past, I'd say, 10 years, they came back and updated that ride to where you could get multiple possible plot points exposed in that ride. And it was great. It was kind of weird in some instances because you wound up crossing paths with sort of continuity errors there, but at the same time, it was a cool thing because it was going to be something different every time. You knew you were never going to get the same result with that ride there. But this thing here, it's essentially a video game, and it's I've had a kind of a fun discussion going back and forth with a buddy of mine because we've talked about the fact that with this thing you're really dependent on your experience is really dependent on who's sitting where in this ride. Because if you've got a couple of jokers up there who aren't going to do really, or who can't do much in the way of controlling the thing, then your experience is going to suck because you're going to be banging into stuff and you're going to be trying to get them to cooperate and get them to do better with the controls, and you're stuck in the back of this thing not able to do anything at all. So it's very confusing what they've tried to do with this park thus far and where it will be eventually. And this is I had heard this criticism just within the past couple of days, and it set me on my ear because I had not thought of this. But in creating this planet, they created this planet called Batu, where the Black Spire Outpost exists, which Black Spire Outpost is the town, the city, whatever you want to call it, that you're inside of whenever you're at Galaxy's Edge. They've created this thing that does not exist in continuity. They've created this thing that is not familiar to Star Wars fans. This is not Tatooine. This is not Endor. This is not anything that we've seen before. So there is nothing for us emotionally to latch onto and say, that is mine. That is my moment from this saga. And I think the worst part of it is that, not only is it not something that's familiar, they kind of have pushed people towards the new stuff in the new saga to where it's like, okay, well, this is where we're at now with saying, all right, you've got to focus on The Last Jedi or, whatever in terms of the plot points. And people just I don't think people want it. I don't think people have really been all that anticipatory in terms of saying, all right, well, I've got to go be a part of this thing here now. And that's a great arguing point to the fact that this is not a familiar thing to Star Wars fans. And I had not thought of that at all here without hearing it expressed a couple of days ago in a commentary that I read online. But it makes perfect sense. It really does. I still think, though, there's other stuff that's playing into this and why the performance of this park, or this land, I keep saying park, but why the performance of this land has not been that ideal. And, you have all those other stuff about the fact that Disneyland is very much a pass holder heavy park. It is a area to where you have people who, since it's, in Southern California there, it's in Anaheim, it's a thing where people, they buy their annual passes and they come weekends, whatever, and go to the park and go home. It's not a tourist destination like Orlando is, where there's resorts and where there's all this other stuff to be done in that area. So it's suffering because of the fact that there have been blackout dates pushed on the annual pass holders to where the company, Disney, said in making these blackout dates more or less to the annual pass holders, you're taking a back seat to the people who are going to be coming in to see this thing. And I think they way overestimated the amount of people who are going to be interested in coming to this thing when it's not finished. We were talking there a while back about the fact that this is basically a half-done land. I think that whenever the annual pass holder blackout dates expire, you'll see more people in there for sure, because it just, it'll be what it is. They can come into the land finally. But I still don't know that until the full thing is open that you're going to get the real essence of what this land can be to the people who want it. And I'll be honest, I'm still very much looking forward to going to Galaxy's Edge. I'm looking forward to seeing it. However, I am waiting until the point in time that the full land is done before I'm really going to spend the time and money and energy to get down there to see it, because I don't want to have to pay God knows how much money for a hotel and for park tickets and whatever else to see something that's halfway done. I've already waited 3 or 4 years on it. You might as well wait a couple of more months and see it when it's done, because we know now when the second ride, when Rise of the Resistance is going to be opening. because they announced it here within the past couple of weeks that December 5th is the opening date for the Orlando version of the land, and January 17th is the opening date for the land in California. Why? The question at that point in time, after they made the announcement, was why are there such big differences between these opening dates? Why is one next year and one this year? The arguing point there is the fact that of course, the California date is after the Orlando date, but people were saying, well, isn't the California version far ahead in terms of construction? Shouldn't it have been done before the Orlando park? Well, if here you have to sort of hedge your beliefs with what you want to dive into in terms of debate that's online. Evidently, there was some real big construction issue with the version in California. This ride is a trackless ride in that the vehicles you're sitting in and that you're riding in this experience, there's no path, there's no not a cable or a barrier or whatever you want to call it that the vehicle is guided by. There's literally nothing on the floor except for these RFID sensors that communicate with the cars to tell it where to go. Well, evidently there was some issue in the way the RFID sensors were embedded in the construction in the park in California to where they weren't communicating correctly. So they had to go back and redo the whole damn thing, more or less. And that's what's taken the extra time there, is them having to go back, redo some parts of the construction, reprogram things, but also, the notion of ride safety, of course, is a huge thing. Evidently, in California, they have more stringent regulations in terms of what rides have to go through to pass muster. Not to say that there aren't such laws in Florida, but they evidently are more tricky in California than they are here. So the inspection process, from what I've read, can take quite a while for a ride of this nature, especially a brand new thing that has to go through sort of levels of shakedown and being put through its paces. So, it's been frustrating as a fan to see people come across and say this thing has been a failure, because really, truly, to me, it's not. We are still very early on in this thing. There's still a lot of stuff impacting what will be the normal day-to-day operation of this land, and we can't justifiably say one way or the other at this point in time. Is it a success? Is it a failure? Is it leaning one way or the other? I don't think so, because, again, we're still very early on in this thing. We won't know, I don't think, until maybe 6 months out from when the full land is opened that we can say this is a success or this is a failure. I think it'll be a very big success because, well, at least with the iteration that's in Orlando anyway, because we have the land opening, but we also have the Star Wars Hotel that will be opening as well. Those two in conjunction with one another, I think, will be a really insane thing. And that's probably another part of what they're holding off on as well, in putting the whole kibosh on the questions that have been raised about, well, is this what we were promised? Is this going to be some other kind of thing? Was this a bait and switch? Why did we pay all this money to go to what's essentially a Star Wars themed mall? It is what it is. I hate it for people who spend a whole bunch of money in trying to experience this thing the first couple of days, and it winds up being something that they weren't all that in tune for, or that they didn't want, or that they felt in some way, shape, or form taken advantage of. Because like I said, I'm still looking forward to it. I still very much am anticipating the moment of seeing this whole thing firsthand. But I feel for the people who feel like there was a bait and switch done here as well. I don't think it was intentional. I hope it wasn't intentional. It could have been. Who knows? It's business. But at the same time, it's an amazing thing. It's just a cool deal from start to finish that we've now got something that's as real of a Star Wars experience as we'll ever have, here on this earth. So, still plenty to look forward to. Still plenty to do, I would say, even if you don't go to Galaxy's Edge with these theme parks. Still so much to do and experience with all these things. But like I say, I'm very much looking forward to seeing it for myself. It'll be maybe later this year, maybe early 2020 before we're there to really get into the whole thing there. But still, like I say, still looking forward to it and still very much anticipating my moment to when I can get in the old cockpit of the Millennium Falcon there and see how badly I can screw it up, because Lord knows the handling on it is going to be weird as hell. I can just sense that. It looks like, especially with the way they've laid it out to where one person controls the vertical and one person controls the horizontal. Why could that not have been all one person? Why could you not have had one person controlling the actual, the flight aspects of the ship and have someone else controlling like the guns, or maybe two people on guns? I don't know. That's the one weird thing to me. I could care less about whether or not it's a themed mall. I would love to go to a Star Wars themed mall. Why did we have two people controlling the up, down, left, right aspect of the ship? That's definitely not the way it was in the movies. I digress. Folks, we'll be back to finish up the program with the final segment of this episode of the Weekly Trim, where we finish up things with another edition of What's Redbeard Drinking? And it's a topical beverage this time. Stay tuned.
Where the road is dark and the seed is sown, where the gun is cocked and the bullet's cold, where the miles are marked in the blood and gold. I'll meet you further on up the road. Got on my dead man's suit and my smile and skull ring, my lucky graveyard boots and a song to sing. I got a song to sing, it keeps me out of the cold. And I'll meet you further on up the road. Further on up the road, further on up the road, where the way is dark and the night is cold. One sunny morning we'll rise, I know, and I'll meet you further on up the road. Now I've been out in the desert, just doing my time, searching through the dust, looking for a sign. If there's a light overhead, well brother, I don't know, but I got this fever burn in my soul. Further on up the road, further on up the road, further on up the road, further on up the road. One sunny morning we'll rise, I know, and I'll meet you further on up the road. Further on up the road.
Greetings, welcome back. Thank you for being with me here on the Weekly Trim. This again is the July 18th edition of the program, and we've got a topical way of ending the program here because we like to have a little bit of a show and tell in terms of what's Redbeard drinking here on the program. You know, I've said before, I'm not an alcoholic. I just like to sample a lot of new stuff when it comes out on the market. And we've got a topical thing here, but a little bit of an intro to this whole shebang here before we get going into it. I've always been a fan of things of the sci-fi nature and of anything that had to do with superheroes, outer space, whole nine yards. I was seemingly always into it from birth. And I'll say the conditions by which this came about in me being the way I am and being a fan of the things that I am was somewhat tied into the notion of my birth date. Of course, we're at this point in time, we're celebrating the history of the heroes of the Apollo 11 space mission, the men who traveled into outer space and successfully landed on the moon. Tremendous piece of human history there, and a great acknowledgement towards what we as a people have accomplished in science, math, exploration, whole nine yards there. But the cool thing is that the moon landing there took place on July 20th, 1969. This is, of course, the 50th anniversary this year of the moon landing. Well, this is also the 39th anniversary of my birth. Yes, I was born on the same day that those heroes landed on the moon. Not the same year, but the same day. So the fact that I had that as my claim to fame, when everybody seems to look at these dates and say, oh, well, I was born the same day as Keanu Reeves, I was born the same day as Tony Stark, or not Tony Stark, what am I saying, as Robert Downey Jr. or whoever else. I was born on the same day that some guys got out of a spaceship and set foot on a piece of rock that exists outside of our atmosphere. I'm cooler than you are, bro. Don't come at me with that. I'll get you every time. But yeah, I just thought this was a very cool thing because this is, again, it's a great American beer in celebration of a great American moment in all of history. So we've got here the Budweiser Discovery Reserve. And this is a very cool little bottle here. It's it's one of those kind of medicine-shaped bottles. Got a really nice logo on this thing that looks like something that would be part of the space program or maybe the Air Force or whatnot. But this is touted as an American red lager and weighs in at 5% ABV, so not a tremendously stout brew, but definitely a little bit more than the traditional Budweiser samplings and whatnot. And the description of this, as we'll be pulling it off of one of our favorite websites, beeradvocate.com, is such. Budweiser Discovery Reserve is the newest addition to our reserve collection. This American red lager features a light hoppy aroma with a toasted barley malt taste, a hint of toffee, and a sharp finish. Discovery Reserve was brewed to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon mission, with its taste inspired by an archival recipe from that time in history. Featuring toasted Voyager barley malt, the lager's reddish color is reminiscent of the next frontier, Mars. Holy shit, I just got a little bit of a tingle there. I really and truly, as I was reading that, the hairs on my arm stood up. Wow. That's a little bit kind of goofy, but it's also kind of cool that they were able to tie this whole thing into the fact that we're eventually going to get to Mars, or at some point in time, maybe in my lifetime, hopefully in my lifetime, we're going to get to Mars. How cool is that? An actual planet, not a moon, an actual planet we're going to. Oh man, I'm starting to geek out on this whole thing here. But at any rate, I think let's make sure this, yes, it's the same description on the label here on the actual, the bottle. I just want to make sure it was the same thing here. And it's in a screw top, or not a screw top, but it's in a traditional bottle, so we normally have the cool thing there where I get the sound effect of me cracking open the can or whatnot. Don't know if we're going to be able to pick that up here, but we'll give it a shot and see if we can pick up the sound of the bottle opening. I think we might have gotten something there for sure. Maybe a little bit of a not much of one, but we'll see how it goes there in the playback. Let's give this a whiff now that we've had a chance to open the bottle here. This smells good. This really smells And you immediately get the barley and the hops hitting you right there in the nose. It's not especially pungent. This really, I think I'm going to enjoy this a lot. I can, and I've already kind of schmoozed over the whole thing there with it being tied into the Apollo missions and whatnot. But just the aroma coming off of this, very cool. And it's not, people immediately will want to assume that this is like a Sam Adams type thing or a Gaelic ale, that kind of thing. This is not like those, at least in the initial impression of the aroma. So we're going to go back in here and get one more whiff before we do a pour on this one. Very crisp aroma on this. I'm looking forward to drinking this. This is going to be a good beer. I can already tell. I'm very much enjoying the subtleties of the aroma that come off of this beer. Like I said, it's not incredibly pungent. This does not hit you with like a lot of coffee notes or with a lot of bitterness. This seems like it's going to be a very smooth, yet also full-bodied experience here. So let's give this a pour. We're going to pour this into our glass and see how this thing looks. Oh yeah, nice red-brown color on there. Trying to get this in here without too much head on top of it so we can get as much as we can in the actual glass. Very nice, smooth, brown, red color here. And as we top this thing off with just a little bit of foam, that's a good-looking cup of beer there. And as you hold it up to the light, you can certainly see, you talk about color in beers here. This is, it's kind of reminiscent of a good glass of iced tea in terms of the actual color of this here. And that's, the color that you want out of a good red. This very much is a good-looking glass of beer here. Let's put the nose to it one more time now that we've had a chance to expose this to the air. Still very much getting a lot of the toffee and the barley there. This is really, I think, going to be a cool thing to experience. So let's go ahead and get into this. Enough talk. Let's get into some beer. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. That is a very easy drinking red lager. This, I'll be honest with you, I'm not one to reach for Budweiser products when it comes to like my everyday drinking and whatnot. Like if I want something, usually I'm going to reach for something with a little bit more flavor to it. I really wish they would have this all the time, because if they did, I would buy it all the time. This is that good of a beer. It's very smooth. The initial experience is you get that good bitterness. It's not overpowering. It's a very subtle amount of bitterness to these to the brew here. You do get those toffee notes. Just a very good, pleasant experience with this. And as I said, very subtle. Very, with so many beers, it seems like they want to blow your mind with how much bitterness they can pack into these things, or with how much weird flavor combinations they can have. It's like I say when people, they talk about coffee. I don't need coffee that tastes like butter pecan ice cream or some nonsense like that. I want coffee that tastes like coffee. Much like I want beer that tastes like beer. And this tastes like beer. This is a really good beer. We're going back in for some more of this. Oh, man. This is, again, a very full-bodied beer. This is not something that I would say would appeal to your Bud Light drinkers and whatnot of the world. But, man, it's got great flavor. This is really something that would be great to, have with a nice steak dinner, because it would very much complement the savory notes of red meat. I'm really gushing over this thing because I was hoping it would be very good. I was really hoping this would be a great experience, and it has not let me down in any way, shape, or form. This is a great beer. It's got on beeradvocate.com, it's got a rating of 3.59, which in their score is, of course, out of 5. It's rated as good. I would give this as high as maybe a 4, almost 4.25. This is a really good beer. Wow. I did not expect it to be this good. I was hoping it would be good, but man alive. Sometimes, when I do this part of the show, I'll start the experience of whatever we're drinking and I won't finish it, because sometimes it's not something that I want to finish. This I'm going to finish, and you never know, I may finish off the entire 6-pack here in the next little bit. So, wow. This is a really great beer. I definitely would encourage you to seek it out if you're a fan of good beer. This is, again, the Budweiser Discovery Reserve. Great beer. Definitely seek it out if you can find it. I'm really just digging the color of this thing because it's got that great iced tea kind of brownish red hue to it. Just a great beer. Wow, I'm gushing about this thing. Oh man, that's a great way to end a program if ever there was one. But you know what? It's something was brought to my attention here not too long ago. You know, my usual sign off on this program and a lot of things we do has been that I'll see you down the road. And I was just kind of something that I came up with here a while back. But in listening to some music and in having some people point out things to me, I was made aware of the fact that there's an old Bruce Springstein tune that was covered by Johnny Cash called Further On Up the Road. And quite frankly, I don't see any reason why I shouldn't do what the boss and what the man in black would have you to do and signing off of a program like this. So from now on, instead of we'll see you down the road, I'm going to do what the boss and what the man in black says. And I'll meet you further on up the road.